Good afternoon, I'm Brian Reagan. This is
Tyler Kelly.
And we welcome you to our midday meditation on the tiny books of the Bible. And today we are in Philemon. And Tyler, if you will, go on ahead, verses 14 through 19.
But without your consent I wanted to do nothing, that your good deed might not be by compulsion, as it were, but voluntary. For perhaps he departed for a while for this purpose, that you might receive him forever. No longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. If then you count me as a partner, receive him as you would me. But if he has wronged you or owes anything, put that on my account. I, Paul, am writing with my own hand. I will repay, not to mention to you that you owe me even your own self besides.
All right. So, for whatever reason that Onesimus left, we don't really know 100%. But Paul doesn't want to extort a good deed from Philemon. You know, he apparently kind of could have. But what he's trying to do, Tyler, and you know this as well as I do in ministry, how many people do stuff in their Christian walk because of compulsion?
Not a ton.
How many people do it voluntarily with joy?
Some.
Okay, so more do it out of compulsion than
Yes.
out of volunteerism with joy.
Yes.
And that's his point. I can force you to do it because the Lord gives an example that you have to do this. And some people, well, if I have to do it. No, see, the state trooper who stops you because you're doing 35 miles an hour over the speed limit. Now, in some states, that's technically a straight trip to jail. But he looks at you and he says, you know, knock it off. Now, technically, you had a compulsion. You were supposed to be forced to obey that law. Well, it's no fun driving if you're always watching your speedometer going, oh, I have to obey the speed limit. It's a different thing if you go, oh, well, I'm at 71 miles an hour, speed limit 70. Oh, I better drop it back. I enjoy driving and being at peace, so the state troopers don't have to waste their time with me. And by the way, you generally get better fuel economy. Compulsion versus doing it because you choose to. And the simple fact is, even if there's a command, you can choose to obey it because you want to, versus you choose to obey it because you have to. And so that's what he's trying to get him to see. Verse 15, I want to address this because some people use this in the wrong way. This is part of that whole mystical garbage that people get caught up in. Well, maybe this happened because of this. That's not what he's saying. He's making his case that, and if we were to put this into modern language, essentially what he's saying, you know, the time he was away from you, it's ultimately to your benefit. And you need to recognize that, because now he's your brother in eternal life. And he said, well, it says, for perhaps he departed. Paul's not sure why. God didn't. No, that's not the point. We read that and we think that it's some mystical stuff. It's not mystical. Paul's saying there's a good that came out of this. If your slave had to run away, isn't it good he ended up with me, and now he knows eternal life, and now he's a benefit to you and to the Lord, and he's better off as a person now than he ever was. Philemon, set your agitation against a runaway slave aside and see the bigger picture here. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Now, what word do you see in verse 16, Tyler, that occurs multiple other times before we ever get to it? No longer as a slave, but much more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you both in the flesh and in the Lord? What word do you see there?
That's what I thought. Yeah, beloved.
Beloved. Back there in verse 1. To Philemon, our beloved. To the beloved Apphia in verse 2. This thing about being beloved, all right? You said, why is he saying that? Because he's trying to get Philemon to realize that in Paul's heart, Onesimus is the same to my heart as you and Apphia, Philemon. People have this weird thing, you know, where they, you shouldn't use your relationships like that. Why not? Paul's not trying to use it for nefarious purpose. He's trying to use it to get someone to do what's good and right. Use it. Play on relationships to help motivate people to do what's right and good. If you count me as a partner, if you count us as being in fellowship, fellow laborers, which he's already addressed that and said that they are, receive him as me. If he's wronged you, owes you anything, put it on my account. Paul says, I'll pay it. Not that big a deal. Because why? I don't want the issue of money between you and Onesimus to interfere with y'all's fellowship. I'll pay whatever he owes. Now, what do you find funny about verse 19, Tyler? Because verse 19 is funny.
The fact that once again Paul's talking about writing with his sloppy handwriting again.
Well, that's one. That's one.
And then the fact that you owe me even your own self besides.
Yeah. Well, Tyler's getting close. It's still early enough in the morning. Here's the humor. I, Paul, am writing with my own hand. I'll repay it. Not to mention, and then what's he do? He mentions. And you go, no, see, that's why I'm telling you what happens in verse 15 is not this mystical hoogada-boogada that people get caught up in. No, this was how you wrote back then. You would say stuff this way because that was the manner of proper rhetoric among people of different social classes to communicate. You know, Tyler, I don't need to tell you, you know, that you owe me this, because that would be rude of me. But it'd be nice if you would do this favor because of our past acquaintances. And you go, well, you just told him that. I know, it's funny. Now, in our culture, what? It's, you know, people, oh, you're manipulating, you're taking advantage. No. I know you weren't born back then, Tyler. I remember when our society had this thing called intestinal fortitude. And you could walk up to someone and go, hey, I need your help with something. You remember when I helped you a couple months ago, right? Sure be nice to see you Saturday. And you walk off. Someone, no. What would you do? Hey, I gotta help Tyler on Saturday. Gotta help Jim on Saturday. Why? Well, Jim helped me. Well, Jim only said that to manipulate you to helping him. No, he didn't. Jim just put a friendly reminder that I've been there for you. I need you to be there for me. Same kind of stuff. Same kind of stuff. So where do you get that his handwriting was sloppy?
Because doesn't he say somewhere else, look at with what large letters I write to you?
He does. So who taught you that meant his handwriting was sloppy? Oh, okay. Well, no, I mean, you know, if you knew something that I didn't about Paul's handwriting, you know why he wrote in large letters, don't you?
So everybody could read it better.
For emphasis, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Because if it's sloppy, he'd be like, "Ugh," and they'd be like, do you know why Paul wrote with these really large letters? No, we can't read what it says because it's so sloppy. And with that, we bid you good afternoon. We'll see you back tonight for Twilight Talks on Baptism.